Hello, and welcome to Book Circle. I'm Earl Weinberg. This time we will continue our reading of Aunt Jenny and the Delayed Quest. Aunt Jenny is returning victorious and now looking to repair some of the damages her enemy has done. But some of the worst damage isn't physical at all. Chapter 18, Return to the Glassy Isle. In the next few days, the Queen's company grew large enough to fill to capacity all 4 boats that had brought her people and their rescuers back from the Chaos Rim venture, even without supplies. They sailed downriver to the port city of Lajarthi on the shores of the Great Lake. There, Helgrim recruited Tolkar, a ship's captain and owner, who was a relative of his and Hrothar's. When the Blue Swan, Tolkar's ship, set sail, the company consisted of Aunt Jenny, Sasha, 3, Morwenna, Helgrim and his son Garn, Finna, Philum, Ea, and her 2 daughters, Drumthortle and his cousins, Boomerabble and Doc, and of course Rudy and the cats. Cat, too, had joined them, and with her Rollibat and Garl. A whole flock of pea-felines roosted in the masts of both vessels, and there were 4 marcher ponies aboard the ship, along with several weeks' provisions for them all. Their first destination was the Shattered Isle. According to the Rootmeat, Maeve's people on the island were reporting no dragons or other attacks since the fall of the city in chaos, so they were not particularly surprised that the journey was uneventful. Cat and the Blue Swan skirted the poisoned vapors and pulled into the harbor from the Summerward. Once they were moored a short distance from the ship from Illimcrown, Aunt Jenny crossed over to Cat. "How are you faring, Cat?" "Not too badly, Aunt Jenny. There are currents here and there carrying some pretty nasty water. I don't think it will make me sick as long as I avoid them. I haven't encountered any in this harbor yet." "Well, don't take any chances. Stay out of the poisoned waters as much as you can." "I will, ma'am, unless I'm needed for a rescue or something. I'll keep well away." "Can you detect the vapors in the air or just the poisoned water?" "Mostly the water, ma'am." "And you," Jenny asked of her pea-cat, "can you folk detect the vapors before they make you too sick?" "Yes, ma'am." "Then I want you to send out patrols in shifts. We need to be able to warn Cat and Captain Tolkar if the deadly vapors start to be blown this way, so that they can sail beyond their reach. Can you do that?" "Yes, ma'am." Once Cat and Tolkar had agreed to leave if either the water or the air became a threat, Aunt Jenny went ashore with a small party consisting of Sasha, Morwenna, Finna, Big Tom, and Rudy, along with 4 of the pea-felines. They were met by Timmins, who brought them immediately to the king. Vrain was sitting in the same room, the kitchen, as she had last seen him. At least he wasn't sick in bed. "Your Majesty," she said, and sketched him a bow. "Huh," he replied. "Aunt Jenny, they say you are a queen now." "Well, wielding a crown in defense of the Halflands, at least. I'm not sure about queen, though. How are you feeling?" "How should I feel? My queen not merely dead, but trapped beyond the waves? The very air and waters of our island poisoned?" was his response, and he looked no better than he sounded. His skin had a grayish tone, his hair was tangled and matted, he was dressed in rumpled gray tunic and hose under an ill-fitting olive dressing gown, and lolled in an overstuffed chair by the fireplace. "I'm sorry to hear that. Perhaps I could aid you in my role as healer." "Pheh," he said. "Why not be of real use and rescue my queen?" "Very well," she replied with a nod. "If that is your wish, as your ally, it is my desire to be of aid as best I can." As she turned to leave, she caught the eye of the mage sent by Queen Maeve, and gestured for him to accompany her out. They all made their way to a nearby drawing room where Aunt Jenny introduced herself, Sasha, and Finna. The mage, an aged-looking maroon-robed fay with long gray hair and mustaches and a thin scrap of beard, introduced himself as Rickert the Red, a court magician to the Queen of Illamcrown. "What can you tell us, sir, of the conditions of Rayan and Vivian?" "'Tis much as 'twould appear. He suffers sorely from his poisoning, both recent and long past, but even more from his misery and grief over the loss of his queen. I have striven to imbue him with a certain amount of strength and health, but the weight of his spirit sickens the body beyond my ability to cure." "I thought as much," Jenny nodded. "I can tell you less of the queen. She speaks to him in dreams, and it is hard to judge if what we hear is more her misery or his, but 'twould seem that she is seldom conscious, weighed down by death, loss, and the magical nature of the poisonous water that surrounds her. 'Tis nigh impossible to entrap the dead without carefully crafted magics, but something, be it the poisonous waters, her own heavy spirits, or the crystal cave she lies in, saps her of nearly all strength and energy that she might have." "And no one can get to her?" "We have tried, but the Black Heart is not far from the cave's mouth, and the poison emanating from it has proven to be beyond our powers to breach." Could her own broken will and residual magic be aiding in her imprisonment and the power of the Black Heart? "I had not thought her strong enough for that to be a factor, but 'tis possible that she worsens her own plight, as does the king." "I imagine that you have tried to protect someone and send them down to her?" "Yes, ma'am. The magic of the Black Heart has been too powerful. It was created by she who was once a dragon, and she imbued it with sufficient power to poison Queen Vivian herself." "Well, we did take away one of her sources of power. That may well have weakened the Black Heart as it did her invading forces." Rickert nodded, and she paused in thought for a minute or two. "The fact that it was I and the Marginalia who dealt her that blow may have a certain symbolic power. Symbology had a lot to do with how I mustered the power to drive her away. I may be in a better position than others to aid her, at least for the moment." "It is possible, ma'am. You accomplished what others had not." "When she recovered the sword, we used 2 spells to protect ourselves. Did you use the items we enchanted, or try to construct your own?" "Yes, ma'am. Yes to both. Neither sufficed. The rescuers succumbed and must needs be hauled back out." "So we need something stronger." She looked to Finna, who was standing nearby but out of the way. "Yes, Aunt Jenny," said the Peri. "I wonder, your bandages, the hydrocolloid-like ones, they absorb corruption and filth or poisons from the wound, draw them out and away from the body?" "Yes." "What if we were to create an all-encompassing suit of something similar, and perhaps enhance it with the sort of magic used in our earlier items? Do you think that perhaps we could make a stronger protection against the Black Heart's poison?" Finna thought for a while before answering. "Yes, in principle that could work. I would have to see the earlier items and consult with Rickert on how they worked and failed, but we could create such a suit. I cannot say 'twould be enough, but it might. I would know more when 'twas actually made." Rickert chimed in. "Madam, if I may, one must needs still breathe, and that requires a bubble of air. The items we have could not sustain it long enough. There must be another solution to that problem ere there is a true solution." "Yes, I agree. The masks I made were just a knitted version of those worn in my home by surgeons to keep airborne contagions and poisons at bay. They were no more than a symbol upon which to hang the enchantment. We will need something stronger. Do you have anyone who can work in glass?" "Oh, yes, ma'am. I brought craftsmen with me who knew the isle best. While we've had no need of glassworking, our mason knows it well." "Could he perhaps—" "She, ma'am. Could she make a large, clear, wide-mouthed bottle or jug that would fit down over my head and be attached to the suit?" "Aye, ma'am, 'tis a good notion. The hardness of the glass and the jug's ability to retain water would offer a good medium for the spell." I'm sorry, Aunt Jenny, said Finna. You said my head? Do you mean to essay the journey yourself? I do. I have some ideas regarding how Vivian might be brought out, but I shall have to be on the spot, I think, to deal with the details. Then we shall all want the utmost care taken in the item's construction. Aunt Jenny dismissed the notion that any more care should be taken to protect her than any other, but nonetheless the planning and the effort were given substantial attention by Rickert, Finna, Morwenna, Aunt Jenny, and the craftswomen and men who were involved. Several hours later, Aunt Jenny found herself in a bubble-helmeted, skin-tight diving suit, walking down to the shore accompanied by companions wearing enchanted masks made of the same material as her suit. Finna, Rickert, Morwenna, Sasha, Three, Vrayan, and Timmins were with her. The air inside the glass bubble was warm, making the coolness of her crown more noticeable. The crown on her head and a plain canvas shoulder bag were all that she was wearing other than the suit and helmet. She tried not to think how odd she must look. Vrayan, she said, her voice soft and echoey through the glass. He nodded, and she took a ball of thread out of the bag, unrolled a couple of feet, and retaining the end, handed the ball to the king. Take this, and as I walk, play it out to me like a fishing line. It is the thread of life which I created in Chaos Rim. When I get to Vivian, it will connect you to her, and give her something to follow back. Take up the slack gently as she returns. I shall, croaked the king. Timmins and Three supported him on either side. She took a conch shell out of her bag and handed it to Sasha, who held it up to her ear. Another was incorporated into the helmet just in front of her chin. Can you hear me better now? She asked Sasha. Yes, Aunt Jenny, it's working well. I feel like something out of a comic book version of 20,000 Leagues, or one of those superhero kings of Atlantis. She laughed. The rubber body stocking and bubble helmet does make a pretty good superhero suit, said Sasha, laughing in return. Oh, great. Witch queen and superhero. I don't want to think about what's next. Well, we'd better get on with this. Everyone ready? Yes, they all replied. Sasha stepped forward and tied a rope around Aunt Jenny's waist. Morwenna cast a light glow and set it to float just off Jenny's shoulder. After checking them both out, Aunt Jenny started down into the water. Sasha played out the rope and Vrayan the thread. Progress toward the cave was slow, making sure that she didn't foul either of the lines leading back to shore. As the bottom dropped away and the water rose to her shoulders, she began to float, losing traction. I'm going to try being heavy to see if I can walk submerged. She started to reach up to touch the crown on her head, but remembered the bubble and instead just concentrated on the cool feel of its metal against her scalp, the feel of her foot pressing down on the pebbly bottom. It seems to be working. I'm going to try tying off the thread, though, just in case I need both hands. She hunkered down a little, pulling the helmet below the surface so that she could see what she was doing, and tied the thread to the rope around her waist. Having done that, she walked down deeper, concentrating on being able to press down hard with her feet. The crown cooled. She was definitely using its magic. How are you doing, Aunt Jenny? Can you hear me? Came Sasha's voice from the conch. Not bad. It's slow going, but everything's okay so far. I think I can see the cave mouth, and there's a dark area off to my right that may well be the heart. Tendrils like dark mist or something, or someone swirling ink into the water, waft out of it. Foot by foot, she made her way through the water toward what she took to be the cave mouth. It turned out to be just a crevice in the underwater cliff face. As she got close enough to see that, she spotted the actual cave and turned to go that way. Sasha? Yes, ma'am? There's a dark current, almost undoubtedly the poison, weaving around the cave. I'm going to have to go through it. There's no choice. I understand. Keep us informed. I'm approaching it now. She made large, sweeping motions in the water, creating eddies and small currents that caught up some of the inkiness, but much of it remained. I'm going to stop concentrating on being able to walk and swim through it. I think that will be faster. Give me some slack on both lines and be prepared for me to speed up. Done. And sure enough, both rope and thread went slack. She pushed off from the bottom and with some sure, careful strokes swam forward through the murk and on into the cave. How are we doing back there? Is my swimming pulling too hard on the lines or anything? No, we're okay. I think I see surface and light ahead. A few more yards. Whoa, lines got taut. They may be snagging at the entrance. I'm turning back to check. I'll coil the slack. She did, and when she got to the entrance, it turned out that it was enough of a corner for the lines to get caught. She freed them and then got the folk on shore to play out a few extra yards, which she coiled. She then swam slowly back into the cave, playing the line out until she could break through the surface and found herself in a sparkling crystal chamber. There, not far away, she could see a crumpled heap as if someone had casually thrown a cloak upon the ground. Though it was not far, still it was clear that she didn't have enough slack to reach it, and so she swam back to the entrance, had them play out more slack for her, and returned to the cave. "Vivian!" she called, but got no reaction, and so, careful not to snarl her lines, she climbed up out of the pool onto the floor of the cave. From there, Jenny could make out the dim, translucent figure of the queen, and crept to her side. In the frail light, it was hard to see the ghostly form of the queen. In fact, the only thing that Aunt Jenny could clearly make out was the amulet around her neck. "Vivian," she called softly, but the ghostly form didn't stir. Carefully, setting aside the remaining slack, she reached out to touch the amulet. The king's eye immediately shone brighter. "If you're here, Tom, can you speak to her? Rouse her, please," she murmured softly. After a moment, she thought she heard a soft whisper from the queen's shade. "Yes, yes, again, dear. You're getting through to her. I need her to sit up, cast the eye's gaze on herself more directly. Wake up, Vivian." There was a warmth on Jenny's shoulder, as if a gentle hand rested there, and Jenny smiled. Again, Vivian stirred. "Yes," Jenny could almost hear her say. "Wake! Sit up!" she instructed Vivian. The warmth on her shoulder pressed down, and Jenny stilled herself, relying on the other presence. Vivian stirred and opened an eye. "Sit up, my dear, and take this," Jenny said, as she untied the thread from her waist and dragged it across Vivian's ghostly palm. The hand closed, and Vivian clutched the thread to her chest. "She's holding the thread," Aunt Jenny whispered to the conch, and heard Sasha relay. Someone sobbed at the other end. "Vrain?" murmured the queen who was. Her eyes darted around. "Where?" she asked. "I'm here, Vivian. It's Aunt Jenny. Can you sit up? I've come to take you to him." Slowly, Vivian did sit up, clutching the thread. Aunt Jenny removed the amulet and held it up so that its full gaze was upon the shade. Vivian regained more opacity. Jenny laid one hand upon Vivian's shoulder and willed some of her magical strength to flow into the older queen. It seemed to work, and Vivian sat up straighter. "What are you wearing?" came the query, and Aunt Jenny smiled. "A protective suit a few of us worked up so I could get here." "You look very odd and not quite seemly." "It's a small price to pay." "Where's Vrain?" "On shore at the other end of that thread, the thread of life. I've come to bring you to him. Are you strong enough to stand?" "I know not." They tried and found that she was not. Aunt Jenny offered to share some of her magical energy. Vivian agreed, and this time was able to draw some of it out of Jenny. Psychic leeching was, she explained, something that some ghosts can do. And so, with Jenny's willing help, Vivian was soon able to try once more to rise. This time she stood, and after a while took a step, then another. Step by step they made progress. Hand in hand they cast the protective spells, and with Vivian as strong as they could make her, once again wearing the king's eye, she clutched the thread in one hand and Aunt Jenny's hand in the other. They slowly made their way into the water, out of the cave, and back to the beach. The journey exhausted Vivian, and Aunt Jenny ended up carrying her, but she never stopped winding the thread, and finally it led her to the king. "And so, Bran," said Aunt Jenny breathlessly as she approached the king, "I return to you your queen, without whom it is doubtful that we should have survived our journey to Chaos, freed the Marginalia, cast down her city, and thereby turned back the mother of monsters." With that, Aunt Jenny laid the fragile queen who was into the king's arms. "Thank you," he replied with genuine warmth. He turned and began his walk back to Castle Glass. Though his burden was light, he needed both Timmins and Three to aid him. Still, he would not let any other carry her. Once he had topped the rise, Aunt Jenny turned to those who remained, Sasha, Morwenna, Finna, and Rickard, took a deep breath and said, "Time for part 2, the Black Heart." "Are you sure you're not too tired?" asked Sasha. "Perhaps it would be better when you're fresh." "No, I feel fine. I'd like to keep the ball rolling." "Very well, then," said Morwenna with a deep sigh. "Did you learn aught while you were near the heart?" "Yes, it was hard to see clearly in that inky mess, but I think it is no more than fist-size, perhaps, maybe smaller. We should be able to scoop it into one of the jars we brought." She gestured to a number of varying-sized glass jars sitting on the beach a few feet away. "If the proximity to the heart doesn't overwhelm you," warned Sasha. "True, but I felt negligible effects as I passed by it, though I was able to limit my contact with the poison. Right now, it's still largely guesswork." "Will you swim or walk to it, or shall I fly you over it?" asked Finna. "Are you feeling the vapors here at all?" asked Jenny. "No, the mask does seem to work against it." "Then perhaps you should lower me right on top of it." "'Tis still my favorite choice as well, but 'tis yours to decide." Aunt Jenny selected a large, roughly spherical jar wrapped in a rope net bag, its lid connected to the net with a cord. There was a wax ring on the mouth of the jar and the rim of the lid to provide a watertight seal. "I think the heart will fit easily into this one. It will be a little heavy filled with water, but that should only be a problem once I'm out. Will you have any trouble carrying me with it, Finna?" "I think not." "Good. Then shall we give it a go?" "Here, have the conch," said Sasha, and offered the shell to Finna. "I do not think I shall need it. If I may, Aunt Jenny, I can enchant your helm that we might converse." "Go ahead. It will be good if both you and those ashore can speak with me." Finna laid her hands upon the bubble helmet, closed her eyes, and murmured. Removing her hands, she asked, "Can you hear me?" "Yes," Aunt Jenny chuckled. "Your voice makes the glass ring a bit." "And I can hear you both in the conch," said Sasha. "Good. Comm check complete, and we're ready for liftoff," said Aunt Jenny. Finna smiled. "Then lift you I shall." And we shall follow Aunt Jenny on her second underwater mission next time.